Okay, and so Judges 19 through 21. This is going to be the last, as we said, story in Judges. As we mentioned before, the chronology of Judges isn't what is really tight. And so what takes place in our last story that we talked about, the Levite and Micah and the idol probably took place probably around 1290. This is going to be about the same time frame. This is going to take place about one generation after Joshua. And so it's going to be very early in the Judges. Probably you've had Othniel, the first judge, and then this takes place where we see in Judges chapter 19 through 21. And so let's go ahead and let's read verses 1 and 2 of our text. Oh, before we do that, here's a map real quick. I'm sorry about that. These are some of the towns that we're going to be talking about. This map will flash up, I think, later on in our presentation. But as you can see, the very top you have Dan. The very bottom you have Beersheba. These are kind of the top and the bottom of the Israelite region, if you will. And so from Dan to Beersheba is a idiomatic expression that says basically the entire country. You're going to see right there in the bottom, you're going to see Bethlehem. Bethlehem is going to be important to our story. Remember that. Above Bethlehem, you're going to see two places that are going to be very important to our story. That's going to be Mizpah, and also you're going to see, where is it at? You're going to see Gibeah right there. And so these are going to be very important. And then Shechem and Jabesh Gilead. And so think about those places and we'll go on, okay? First, let's talk about the heinous act that takes place in chapter 19. Let's read verses 1 through 2 of Judges 19. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was unfaithful to him, and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for some 4 months. And so first we have this tale of this Levite, right? He has a concubine. He's living in the hill country of Ephraim. Now, if you can remember from last week, when we talked about the Levite and the one that was living in Bethlehem that sojourned up and then started to live with Micah and his family, one of the things that we said that he violated the law of Moses was what? Right? He lived in Bethlehem, right? There were 48 cities the Levites were supposed to live in. The Levites, did they or did they not get a land portion? They didn't, but they were given 48 cities, right? Some of which were called cities of refuge that they were supposed to live in. This Levite, just like the Levite from the last story, does not live in one of these 48 cities. He lives in the hill country of Ephraim. He's violating the Mosaic law, and besides that, he practices polygamy, which the Mosaic law is against, and he takes a concubine from Bethlehem. And so the Levites, in some translations it says that she was unfaithful to him. Some translations says that she was angry with him. The Hebrew there is kind of hard, and so some translations say angry, some translations say unfaithful. We're not really sure what took place, but for some reason she goes down to Bethlehem, back to her father's house. The Levite goes down after 4 months to try to get her. He stays for about a week. He keeps trying to get his concubine wife and leaving, and his father-in-law is like, hey man, stay, let's eat, let's drink, just relax, don't be in a hurry to leave. And so he stays there for about a week, and then he says, no, I've got to go. Well, it's late in the evening, and they're traveling. There's no way they're going to get back to Ephraim. It's just way too far. And so they get close to Jerusalem. And his servant says, Lord, why don't we stay here in Jerusalem for the night? It's getting late. It's getting dark. It's dangerous on the highway at night. Let's stay here at Jerusalem. He says no. Anybody want to guess why he says no? He says, we can't stay in Jerusalem because of the people who live there. Well, how could he say that about his fellow Israelites? Anybody know? Trick question. Anybody? Miss Julia knows. She's smiling at me. Anybody know? Were they his countrymen in Jerusalem? No. Told you Miss Julia knew. Because Jerusalem was still held by the Jebusites, right? Jerusalem doesn't become a city of the Israelites until David. David conquers Jerusalem, runs out the Jebusites, and then makes that his new capital, right? He says, we're not going to stay over here with the Jebusites. They're Canaanites. No, we're not staying with these guys. Let's go on up to Gibeah. Let's go up there to our people. So he goes there and he gets there, and under the Mosaic law, they had to be hospitable. So he's traveling with his donkeys, his concubine wife, his servant. They get there. They go to the town square. nobody offers to take them in. And so they're there in the town square. They have all the provisions. He's got all the grain for his donkeys. He's got all the food he needs. He just needs some place to rest his head. But the people there are not being hospitable to their fellow Israelite, which is against the Mosaic law. There's an Ephraimite man who comes in and says, hey, you guys come and stay with me. And so he goes and he stays with the man, the Ephraimite. He's there. Let's pick up with verses 22 through 16 of chapter 19. 22 through 16. We'll have Sodom part 2. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him. And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring out them now. Violate them, do with them what seems good to you, but against this man do not do this outrageous thing. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. And so here you have very obvious similarities between Genesis 19 and here in Judges 19. It's interesting that the same chapter number. Anybody want to fill us in what takes place in Genesis 19? Sodom and Gomorrah, right? How many men are here in the house? This guy just says one, but we know that's not true. How many men are in the house? There's two, right? There's two visitors. There's the guy we're talking about, the Levite, and he's got a servant who's a man, right? In Genesis 19, how many men are visitors in the house? Two, right? So same number of men, right? Here you've got two visitors. Genesis 19, you got two visitors. All right, here the men come and say, hey, bring these guys out. We want to violate them, obviously sexually. Genesis 19, what takes place? Exact same thing, right? Lot begs them, says, no, don't do this thing, right? This is wicked. What does Lot do in Genesis 19? Yeah, he says, don't do this thing, right? And he says, here's my two daughters, right? Take them, do what you will. What does this guy try to do? How many women does he offer to the crowd? Two daughters, right? His virgin daughter and the concubine wife. And so in both cases, the similarities are striking. I mean, extremely striking. And God, what does he do to Sodom? Fire and brimstone, right? Wipes it off the face of the earth. And here you have Israelites. These are supposed to be the light to the nations. This is supposed to be the people who are going to be holy and pure and show God's pureness to the Canaanites. And that's how wicked they've become. They've become so wicked, like the Sodomites, that God wiped off the face of the earth. Of course, they take the concubine. We're not told about whether or not the virgin daughter was actually sent out or not. They sexually violated her all night long until the morning, and she dies because of their abuses. But there are repercussions. And so let's read verses 29 through 30 of our text. 29 through 30 of our text. And we had entered his house, he took a knife, talking about the Levite, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, such a thing has never happened or been since the day from the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. And so the Levite gets home, his concubine is dead, and takes out a knife, and he cuts her into 12 pieces, and he sends her out to the 12 different parts of Israel. And so this act was detestable. It violated what a proper burial was and how one was supposed to treat a corpse. The morality of the Levite is obviously not very highly regarded in here. He's not living in the city specified by a Levite. He takes a concubine, which he should not do, and now he's mutilating the body of his concubine that he had sent out to the men who basically killed her after sexually abusing her. And so he sends it out, and the nation weeps. And the people say, this is awful. Like, there's never been such a heinous act in all of Israel. In fact, Hosea would talk about this in Hosea 9:9 and Hosea 10:9 as one of the worst things the nation of Israel ever did. And this is a result of everyone doing what is right in his own eyes. Now, the Hebrew here is not translated the same, but the phrase is the same. The main text that comes up several times in the book of Judges is, everyone did what was right what? In his own eyes. If you look at the Hebrew, it's the same here. He sends out the concubine and says, here, do what is right to her in your own eyes. And so this is the result of what takes place when men do what they think is right in their own eyes. And so that phrase right there is extremely important in this narrative. Any questions on Judges 19 before we move on to Judges 20? Judges 19. Yes, Brother Ricky.
Why would he do this to his concubine as opposed to going after the men that killed her in the first place?
Yeah, it's it's hard. I mean, I think it shows the lack of morality, the lack of morality of the Levite, the lack of respect that he had for his concubine. Almost as if she leaves him. It takes 4 months. I can't stand if Brittany's mad at me for 4 minutes, right? She leaves him for 4 months. He doesn't go down and get her. Eventually he does. Then he goes to the city and he just throws her out like she's, subhuman, to this pack of men. And for us, I can't fathom somebody being that vile. We talk about the vileness of these men, and of course they are vile and wicked, but the Levite is not much better. This is supposed to be somebody who's a priest. He's supposed to embody what holiness is supposed to be, and even the priest is just not very impressive. It's a good question. And the only thing,
The father may take my daughter.
yeah.
The father's supposed to protect their daughter.
Well, Lot does the same thing, right? Lot does the same thing 500 years earlier. And it's just...
That is a lack of respect for women in the first place.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Rick, women have more responsibility. Women have more freedom. Women have more status today, especially in this country, than any other time in human history. And I think, honestly, what you see the lack of respect that women have in general here in Judges 19 and also in Genesis 19.
The tradition of those men at that time was, if you come into my house, you're a guest, and they protect you.
Right. Yeah.
You see that several times in the scripture.
Yeah. Hospitality was a big deal, but only a big deal for the man. You notice here that the hospitality, the idea that I need to defend and protect my guest is only extended to the men in Genesis 19, and it's only extended to the men here in Judges 19. No, it's not extended to the women, which is sad, but it goes to show, and we're going to see throughout Judges 20:21 just how low women are considered at this time. It's sad, but it's the nature of the affairs of the time period. We are very blessed in this country in a lot of ways. One of those ways is the elevated status of women in this country. Great questions. All right, let's look at Judges chapter 20. This is a picture of Mizpah. You can go there even today. This is a picture of recent times. Mizpah is going to be important because as he sends out the 12 parts of his concubine, the whole nation assembles here at Mizpah. And they make a sacrifice and seek the Lord, and the Lord talks to them about what they're going to do. And so this is Mizpah. It's on a hill. You can actually go there today. It's going to be central to our story here in the next chapter. And so Benjamin is where this tribe takes place. So this city was a Benjamite tribe. Okay? So Israel is punished. Let's read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 20. Then all the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba. Now, why did I say Dan Beersheba was an idiomatic expression for what? The entire nation, right? All right, from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead. And the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And the chiefs of all the people of all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men on foot that drew the sword. 400,000 people is a lot of people. I mean, if you've ever been to Bryant-Denny Stadium or to the Inland Stadium, it's the easiest way for me to wrap my mind around that big of a number. That's 4 of those stadiums. I mean, these are warriors. They're fighting men. It's a massive amount of people. They all come together in this one place to figure out, what are we going to do? Right? We've got this. This cannot go unanswered. And so kudos to the nation of Israel saying, we've got to stop this type of treatment at one thing. This is the only time. I mean, we just read an entire 21-chapter book about how the nation of Israel is being oppressed by different nations and how God rises up judges. How many times in the book of Judges does the Israelites come together as one man to fight a foreign enemy? 0. Right? Not one time. They're oppressed for 18 years, 40 years. They never come together, right? Here, they all come together, 400,000 men who are fighting age. This is unique. It mentions as one man in verse 1, verse 8, verse 11. This is a big deal here in the book of Judges because they've been so fragmented throughout the book. They appealed to the tribe of Benjamin and said, look, guys, you're our countrymen. You're a fellow tribe. Give over the guys. We'll take care of them. It'll be okay. Like, we're not going to do any repercussions on you because that's not fair. The tribe of Benjamin says what? Anybody know? What was that? They say no. And they said, give us the guys. They say, no, we're not giving them to you. And so when they decide not to give them the guys, that means war. And so the Israelites are united more here than any other time, probably since the Exodus itself. And so the Benjamites refuse to hand over these vile men, and so that means war. And so let's read verses 14 through 17 of our text. Then the people of Benjamin came together out of the cities of Gibeah and out of the battle against the people of Israel. And the people of Benjamin mustered out of their cities on that day 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who mustered 700 chosen men. Among all those who were 700 chosen men who were the left hand, everyone could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And the men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of war. And so Benjamites were known to be fierce warriors, and so the Benjamites are outnumbered 400,000 to 26,000. The Benjamites don't care. I mean, they don't kowtow. They don't say we're vastly outnumbered. We should hand these guys over. They say no, we'll fight. And so they muster up an army. And when we think about a sling, we shouldn't think about the VBS illustration that we think about David and Goliath. David was probably in his early 20s when he faced Goliath. He was a man of war. And this was the equivalent to the ancient missile. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Parthians, the Persian Empire, they all used slingers. And so they would take a stone that weighed about a pound and they could throw it 90 miles an hour about 150 yards. I mean, it's the equivalent of a modern day missile, if you will. And so imagine a 1 pound stone being hurled 90 miles an hour and hitting somebody. I mean, it is deathly, and they were greatly feared. I mean, the Spartans used slingers, and so these was they could throw it at a hair and not miss. It's pretty impressive. And so the Israelites are at Mizpah, and they say, Lord, what do you want us to do with Benjamin? Do you want us to fight him? So they go to the Lord and they ask. They say, Lord, what do you want to do? And he says, go fight him. And he says, who do you want us to send? And he says, send Judah. Judah's got 40,000 men. So 40,000 men against 26,000. Pretty good odds, but the Benjamites think, oh, we can take them. And so the very first day they go and they fight. Before we know this, anybody know who came from the tribe of Benjamin? I'll take a step further. Anybody know they actually came from the city? Gibeah? Where they're fighting? Saul. That's right. So the first king, right, comes from this exact same city. And so just an interesting note there. But anyways, so they send out 40,000 men against 26,000 Benjamites. Who do you think wins? God tells them to go fight. God says send Judah. The Israelites do everything God tells them to do. Who wins? Benjamites. Right? I know it's counterintuitive, right? You would think, well, they asked God. God said go. He said, who do we send? You send Judah. We sent Judah. We lost. It is counterintuitive, but that's what happens. And so they lose 22,000 men out of 40,000. How many is left? My math majors out there. 18,000. So they go again the next day, and they fight against Benjamin. Guess how many lose the next day? 18,000. They lost the whole 40,000 member troop. So the Israelites go back to Mizpah, and they make sacrifices and peace offerings, and then they cry and they wail, and they say, Lord, what do you want us to do? Like, we did everything you said, and we were losing. We just lost 40,000 men. And the Lord says, they said, do you want us to fight them or not? He says, no. Go up and fight them tomorrow, and then they'll take you until you'll beat them. And so they go, the high priest is there, Phinehas is there. He's the grandson of Aaron, the son of Eleazar, which is how we can kind of date when this incident took place. And so the entire town, they kind of lay in wait, right? The Israelites fight against them, then they retreat. And the Benjamites think, we beat them 2 days in a row. They're retreating. They pull them away from the city. When they pull them away from the city, they kind of swoop in around, and they ambush them. And they kill everybody. They kill the entire army of the Benjamites except for 600 warriors. After they kill the Benjamites, they go and they destroy every city of Benjamin. I mean, they eradicate nearly the entire tribe of Benjamin. And so if you look at Judges 20:48, it says the Israelites returned to the Benjamite towns and put to the sword to them. They wiped out the cities, the animals, and everything they could find. They set fire to every city in their path. And so not only did they destroy the entire town of Gibeah, and the text says they killed the women, they killed the children, they killed the babies, they killed the animals, they killed it all. Now, what's the ironic thing in the story? At least, anybody know what I'm thinking is the ironic thing?
What they were supposed to do when they first got
Yeah, to who?
on the Amorites, everybody.
Yeah, the Canaanites, right? I mean, and did they do that? No! Like, they never gathered together as one army. They never had 400,000 troops at one place. They never fought like this against any of the Canaanites, which they were supposed to do. But they wiped the tribe of Benjamin off the face of the earth, except for 600 warriors. I mean, this is incredible. We're talking about, a tribe. If we look at what Numbers tells us how many people are in the tribe of Benjamin and when this is, we're talking somewhere between 50 and 75,000 people. And they killed all but 600? And they're Israelites. Yeah. And so they can't get together and force the Canaanites out. But boy, we can do a good job against the Benjamites. I mean, even in their victory, it shows their dysfunctionality of fulfilling what God wants them to do. It's not that they were incapable. I mean, if the Israelites really wanted to take the land of Canaan and they really wanted to eradicate all the Canaanite tribes, could they have done it? Well, of course they could have. Especially since God is on their side. But I mean, look at this army. I mean, it's massive. And they don't use it on the Canaanites, but they use it on the Benjamites.
How would God come to do it and then kill them?
You're talking about the 40,000 tribe of Judah? I think God was punishing the Israelites. I think He's punishing both sides. Because God has told them to go and take the land. He's told them He's going to fight with them. And they don't do it. They won't do it. He says, don't marry these foreign people. And they do it. And so I think God is punishing both sides. It's kind of like if you have two tribes, let's just say in the Middle East. Right? I mean, the United States has done this for years. You've got two tribes. You don't like either one of them. What do? You give them both guns, right? And then when one starts winning, you give the other side guns. And then when Team B starts winning, well, you give Team A guns. And then you just let them kill each other. No offense, that's been Western, foreign policy for, 150 years, especially since after War I and War II. That's not being political. That's just history. And so I think God is doing that to both sides here. He's punishing both of them. So, great question.
He probably also had to whittle down the number. He didn't like to go to battle with a large number.
Well, I think kind of like the Gideon thing. Like if they go out there with 400,000 men and they win, all of a sudden, was it us or was it God? And that same thing He tells Gideon. He says
10,000 beat 26,000.
Yeah. And so I think you're on something there too. I think He's trying to remind them who's in charge, right? Because you would think 40,000 against 26,000, even without God's help, would win.
They also went to battle without his inquiring of him first.
They gathered together, that's right.
Together made the decision. They didn't inquire to him until they got to get the first time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I think there is some of that too, what you're saying about making sure they realize who's in charge, who's the one who's making the decisions. I think you're exactly right about that. Good. Any other questions or comments? 400,000 men from all tribes mobilizing to completely kill one of the tribes off the land. Unfortunately, it's not one of the Canaanite tribes. It's one of the tribes of Israel. And so they're nearly eradicated. About 100,000 people are going to die. 65,000 roughly Benjamites. 40,000 Israelites, give or take. That's 100,000 people. Just to put that in perspective, I'm going to have a really fast list of wars that the United States have been in and how many deaths have taken place in battles. Revolutionary War, 4,500. War of 1812, 2,300. Indian wars throughout the 1800s, 1,000. Mexican-American War, 1,800. Spanish-American War, 400. World War I, 53,000. Korea, 37,000. Vietnam, 70,000. Gulf War, 400. War on Terror since 2001, 8,300. The only two military actions where Americans have lost more lives in the entire war than this episode is a Civil War with 600,000 and World War II with 400,000. And so this is a major loss. I mean, we're talking about, you take out World War II and Civil War, you add up every war America's been in, and it's maybe with that, with, still short. And so major, it's genocide basically against one of their own people. And so any questions on chapter 20? Yes. It was much smaller than it is today, of course. In the Exodus, we're told that the Israelites had 600,000 fighting men. Normally, a fighting man was somewhere between 20 and 40. And so you didn't have older men, you didn't have adolescents, and you didn't have any women in those numbers. And so some people have tried to guesstimate how many people were in the Israelite tribe, nation as a whole at that time. And you'll find anybody that will come anywhere from 1 million to 3 million is normally what they say for about this time in Israel. The population of Tennessee is about, 4 million? 4.5 million? Is that about right? And the land of the Palestine is a little bit smaller than Tennessee, about the same size. And so you're looking at a place about the size of Tennessee with a little bit less population for the Israelites. Great question. 7 million this time? In Tennessee. Okay, wow. So 7 million in Tennessee. That Nashville growth spurts really put us, really put us on.
How many registered voters there were? I know it was 3.5.
Okay. 3.5 million registered voters. Maybe the election's on my mind, but 7 million people. And so roughly half of our state population and about the same area. And Tennessee's not, super populated, but it kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at here in Palestine. Great question. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, let's look at how this ends in chapter 21. And so the tribe of Benjamin has nearly been eradicated, as I said, almost genocide. There's 600 men that are left. Now let's read verses 1 and 2, and then verses 5 through 6. So verses 1 and 2 and 5 through 6 of 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah, no one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to a Benjaminite. And the people came to Bethel and sat there till evening before God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. Verse 5. And the people of Israel said, Which of all the tribes of Israel did not come up in the assembly of the Lord? For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, He shall surely be put to death. And the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin, their brother, and said, One tribe is cut off from the land of Israel this day. And so, verse 7, what shall we do for wives of those who are left? Since we have sworn by the Lord, we will not give them any of our daughters for wives. And so here, the Israelites had made a vow. 2 vows we're told in this passage. What were the 2 vows they made at Mizpah before the Lord? That's right. One of the vows is, we're not giving any of our daughters to a Benjamite. right? Which is interesting because what was God's law to the people? Yeah, don't marry Canaanites. Well, did they do that? No. But for Benjamin, we took a vow, so we can't break that vow. You know what I'm saying? Just sacred oath. And so you see the hypocrisy even with the Israelites. What was the other vow they made? There's another one there. If you read real closely, you see it. Was that?
Anyone who fell to a symbol before the Lord of their special business.
That's right, Lacey. If you couldn't hear Lacey, anybody that didn't come up to Mizpah to fight against the Benjamites would be put to death. And so they're trying to figure out how they're going to fulfill the wife thing, okay? Let's look at verses 8 through 12 of our text. And they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah? And behold, no one had come up to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were mustered, behold, none of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead were there. So the congregation sent 12,000 of their bravest men to go and commanded them, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male, every woman that is lain with a male, you shall devote to destruction. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man by laying with him. And they brought them to the camp of Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. And so they go and send 12,000 of their warriors, their best fighters. This is, SEAL Team 1 through 12. And they send it to Jabesh Gilead, and they say, kill everything that moves, unless it's a virgin, a female virgin. Everything. 2 months old, 6 months old, 83 years old. Like, you go in there and you kill them all. And that's exactly what they do. They send 12,000 men, and they utterly destroy Jabesh Gilead. And they leave 400 virgins alive. For who? The Benjamites, right? There's a problem, though, right? Our math majors in the audience, what's the problem?
600.
We need 600, right? You have 400. Means we're 200 short, right? And so how do you tell these guys, say, you 400 get wives, you 200 don't. Also, did the girls have any say in this? No. And so this is going to be harsh, but one rape in Judges 19 turns into 600 rapes in Judges 21. And so they get really upset about what takes place in Judges 19, which they should have been, but you're going to see 600 women get raped in Judges 21. It's not a pretty sight about what takes place in the book of Judges. And so this mimics the Canaanite restriction. They say we cannot break our vow. So we found 400 wives for these 600 warriors, but there's still 200. But we can't give them any daughters because we made a note to the Lord that our daughters can't marry these guys. So what are we going to do? So they come out with a good plan. What they think is a good plan. And so let's read verses 20 through 24 of our text. And they commanded the people of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in ambush in the vineyards and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin. And when their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, grant them graciously to us, because we did not take for each man of them a wife in battle, neither did you give them to them, else you would now be guilty. And the people of Benjamin did so and took their wives according to number from the dancers whom they carried off. Then they went and returned to their entrance and rebuilt towns and lived in them. And the people of Israel departed from that time, every man to his own tribe and family, and they went from there every man to his own inheritance. And so there are 200 shorts. They say, you know what? Evidently, there's some sort of festival. Some have said maybe it was the Day of Atonement. Some said maybe it was the Feast of Booths. Maybe it was just a celebration that they had. We don't know what it was. But evidently the young virgins would go out and they'd dance. I don't know. It's before Netflix and PlayStation 4. People are bored, right? So they go out and they dance. And so the 200 guys that haven't been married yet, they go and they snatch 200 girls themselves. They go back to the tribe of Benjamin, and the book tells us they go back their inheritances and they rebuild the towns in Benjamin. And the tribe of Benjamin throughout the book of Judges will always have a super small number of people. That's interesting. The first king of Israel, where is he from? Benjamin, right? And so his great-great-grandfather, maybe great-great-great-great-grandfather, something like that, is one of these 600 guys that goes and basically takes a wife for himself. Now, these girls, both times, were they Israelites? Yeah, they were, right? They're from the tribe of Jabesh Gilead. The 200 were from Shiloh. Both are Israelites. What about their rights? Well, they didn't get a choice. Nobody asked them if they wanted to get married to a Benjamite. And so here you really see just how degrading, maybe, I guess degrading is the right word, time it was to be a female during this time frame. And so any questions on Judges 21? What takes place here? That's right. That's right. I was saving that one. That's good. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And you say, Isaac, how on earth does this, why is this in the Bible? Well, things are not in the Bible because God is happy with what took place. Things are in the Bible because that's what happened, right? And this last verse, just like Brother Philip said, sums it up perfectly. Let's read that together. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. We live in a day and age where people say, you should be able to choose how you live. We live in a day and age where people say, man gets to choose what is right and what is wrong. We get to choose what is morally acceptable and what is not morally acceptable. And of course, if you don't believe in a God, there is no code for morality. So there is no standard. There is no right or wrong. There is no person who can say this is okay and this is not okay. And this is exactly what you see in the book of Judges. You see a people who they do what is right in their own eyes. And man doesn't have that type of responsibility or authority to do that. We're supposed to be listening to God and what He says is right. And so this is what takes place when people decide to live for themselves and not to live for God. Here's a map that you can see here. This is at Mespah. Then you see the battle that takes place right there at Gilboa right here, which you're going to see on the lower left hand of your screen. You can see here they go 48 miles north to Jabesh Gilead there towards the top. You can see that there. That's where they take the wives, the 400 wives. After they completely wipe the city away, they go back to Shiloh, take 200 more, and they go back to the land of Benjamin, and they're there. And so our takeaways for tonight is sin multiplies. You could ask yourself, if the Levite, if you go all the way back to the Levite, if the Levite would have just listened to the Mosaical law, and if he'd had one wife and he lived in a Levite city, would this have even happened? Would 100,000 people be dead? Would 600 women get raped? Would any of this have happened if the Levite would have just done what he was supposed to do? Then you go forward and you say, okay, if somebody would have just taken the Levite and his concubine and his servant in and been hospitable like they were supposed to do on the law of Moses, would any of this have happened? We don't know. If the Ephraimite would have put up a better fight against these wicked men, or if the people of the city would have seen what was going on and stopped this, would it have stopped there? If the tribe of Benjamin would have just handed these guys over, which was the right, morally, and ethical thing to do, would this have progressed any further? And so at each step you see that people don't do what they're supposed to do, and sin just multiplies. That's a takeaway for us today, right? How many times can you look at destruction of people's lives? Families torn apart, people who are servants of addictions and all these terrible things, and you can just trace it back to this one time in their life they could have said yes or no. Instead of saying no, they said, sure, that won't hurt me. Fast forward 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, ruin their entire life, and also those around them, right? This is super applicable to us today. Number 2, how quickly we can fall. When did I say this takes place? Anybody know? It's a bad teacher. There's 150 of you and you don't know when it took place. Anybody? What year did I say? Did I say a year? I don't know. 1290, right? 1290. Okay. Who's the high priest? Phineas. Who's Phineas' dad? Eleazar. Okay. Who's Eleazar's dad? Aaron. Okay. This is 2 generations after Moses. This is 1 generation after Joshua, where the people gather together in Joshua 24:15, the text I used tonight for a reason, and said, you guys choose today who you're going to serve. And if you look at Joshua 24 and following, it says the whole nation said, we're going to follow you, Lord. I'm talking one generation. They're kids. Ain't looking good, right? We can fall fast if we're not careful. Number 3, man cannot set the standard for morality. God sets a standard for morality, and we follow what He has to say. Those are my 3 takeaways. We've got a few minutes. Anybody have any questions, comments, or takeaways you saw from the text?
Back to number 2, who would have thought 40 years ago you could have never convinced anybody that it'd be illegal for a teacher to pray in school and legal for a man and man to get married or a woman and woman to get married?
If you couldn't hear Brother Alvin, he said, how many of you alive 40 years ago would have believed if somebody would have said it'd be illegal to pray in schools and you could be arrested in Kentucky for refusing to give a marriage license to a homosexual couple? A lot of you would look at that person, that time machine, and said, that guy's an idiot. How many of you would have thought that a person could stand up at a university in the United States of America and say that a 40-year-old man should be able to marry a 12-year-old girl? Because you can't tell them that pedophilia is wrong if that's how they express love. Ivy League school in the U.S. about 3 months ago. Yeah. Like you're saying, it happens fast.
It's happening.
That was happening, yeah. We're seeing it, yeah. We're firsthand. Brother Ricky.
I think I've got the right state, but who would have ever thought that Colorado would have a gay governor and he would introduce his spouse as the first man?
Yeah.
That happened today.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you got a little money in the stock market, I heard that weed went up today quite a bit when General Sessions resigned. If you're into that kind of thing. Of course, I'm joking, but, just go show you. So. I mean, like you're saying, it's happening now. As someone with a kid on the way in about 3 months, it's something you got to think about. It's interesting times we live in. We've just got to do our part, stay faithful, and strive to be a light in a very emergently dark place. I mean, this is still a wonderful country. We still have freedoms that most people don't have. There was a statistic that came out a while ago that said that 52% of Americans pray every day or pray daily. The next highest nation in the Western world, or it's not in the Western world, but of countries that we would consider to be like, first world countries, was Australia at 22%. And Great Britain came in third with 18% of people who pray daily. Those are the top 3 countries in the world of industrialized, like, first world problems, or first world countries. We're at 55%. The next highest is at 22. I mean, we're falling, but there's still enough people in this world that if we reach, we can bring back. If we don't sit on our hind ends and do nothing, right? And so, kind of like I said on Sunday, who's that one person you invited to church or Bible study this week? We've got to be proactive, right? And so, I quit preaching. I'm sorry. I also would like to pray for Miss Sharp, Cindy Pratt's mom. She's going to continue to be going through chemotherapy. Is that right, Miss? No. Miss Sharp's cancer is spreading, so they're going to look at the options of what they can do to try to stop that. And so let's keep Miss Sharp in our prayers. If that's all that we have, let's go ahead and let's close them. Yes. I'm sorry. Miss Murtis. That's right. I'm so sorry, Miss Curtis. Miss Murtis wanted to tell everybody today that she misses you. She loves you. And if you're in Columbia, stop by at the Life Care Center. Is that what it's called? Life Care. And see Miss Murtis. Right when you walk in, you go to the birds, take a right. She's first on the left. And it's a great visit. I mean, she talks about you all the time. And so I know she'd love that. So let's go ahead and let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for your word and for the instruction it has to our lives. Help us to make a commitment to serve you and then to follow that commitment ferociously with abiding in your word and standing up for the truth. Dear Heavenly Father, we realize that people can fall both as a nation and as individuals in a short amount of time. Please help us to be diligent, Please help us to be aware of the things that are going around us and help us to be proactive and taking a stand for the truth and sharing that truth with other people. We're so thankful for the country in which we live. Help us to use the religious freedoms that we have to spread that word before it gets too dark to do so. Please watch over us and bless us. Please be with Ms. Sharp as she's going to doctors to see what they can do for her cancer. Please be with Ms. Murtis and other shut-ins and be with Mr. Leland in the hospital. We're so thankful for your loving kindness and your care in our lives. In your son's name we pray. Amen.